traditional drone, have a single camera on a gimbal to capture video, right? Like you can swivel left and right, up and down. Ours has an array of 5 cameras looking sideways to take photos very far away above water. So I guess an external person would look at it and say, okay, this is something that flies fast and is really designed to collect lots of imagery over a large area.
Imagine designing drones that can revolutionize how we monitor our planet's vast oceans. Today, we sit down with Mathieu Johnson, CEO of Marble, to discuss the technological breakthroughs and challenges of creating fast, durable, and affordable drones for maritime surveillance. Stay tuned for this insightful conversation on the future of aerospace and drone technology. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me. Very excited to be here.
So I see that you've been hooked on aerospace since you were 2 years old. So how do you think your family's background in aviation and skydiving kind of shaped your career path and your approach to aerospace innovation?
Yeah, it's a good question because obviously, like, when you're really, really young, you just probably just follow whatever your parents are into. And so, yeah, my dad was a private pilot. So I have lots of very cute pictures of me, on top of like 3 pillows in like a small general aviation airplane. And both my parents were doing skydiving. So I have memories of, being on the weekend in like a tent on an airfield and just watching them doing their skydiving. There was definitely a time when, through adolescence where you kind of rebel against this and you need to you go find your own way. But ultimately, pretty quickly, I just came back into it and realized that actually that's, it's not just my parents. I mean, sure, it had an influence, but it's generally something that I'm very passionate about. And I mean, when you build a company in the space, you do want to have a genuine, very strong passion because it's very tough. And really, the only way to make it happen, is to persevere. So yeah. So took that from my parents and figured out like that was generally my passion as well.
So, during your engineering studies, you worked on some personal projects. You mentioned that in the info that you presented to me. Can you share one project that was like super impactful or maybe transformative of your understanding of aviation's future?
Yeah, so I mean, doing something transformative in our space at the scale when you're doing project by yourself is probably difficult because like building airplanes and like takes a lot of money and it's not like I mean you can do side projects building planes like kit planes like I don't know if you've ever seen these you buy the plans and then you like cut them and everything but that usually takes years so I didn't do any of this. What I did though is I was basically trying to get to a like I was working in Airbus, the aircraft manufacturer that doesn't have doors exploding out of the fuselage, the one based in Europe. And I wanted to get to their secret department, the one designing like the future planes. And to get there, I started doing lots of drones on the side, so starting to design them, build them. Ultimately, got a lot of coworkers involved, and I guess that's probably the thing that was the most impactful, even though at that stage it wasn't having a global impact or anything. It was impactful in the sense that it's quite rare to have people who have strong technical, academic, like professional background that also get their hands dirty in the aerospace industry. If you go into those big companies, people typically think it's below them to, like do woodwork or go do some composites. They just do like a calculation. So I guess yeah, that stage of like when I started transitioning and building stuff on the side and getting people from Airbus like helping me do those side projects, that's probably when I started realizing how much potential there was in the industry, even though again, it wasn't anything transformative yet. But I guess everything from there built from that point. So
Your company's name is Marble, correct?
yeah, correct.
I find it fascinating that your focus is on like fast, durable, affordable drones for maritime monitoring. I think it's fascinating. I would have never thought of it. I mean, I know people use drones for like mapping things and looking at buildings and whatnot, but it's really interesting to me what you're using it for. Can you elaborate on like some kind of technological breakthrough maybe that was crucial for achieving the qualities in your drones?
I guess the reason maritime is interesting because I mean I do kite surfing and I have an interest in maritime, but really we're building drones from the marine monitoring because there is a business and technical opportunity there. What's interesting about maritime is that it's much easier to do beyond line of sight flying because I don't know if you're familiar. I think you are familiar with drones. It's like you can't really fly a drone far away from the operator because if you do fly far away from the operator, you can't see the drone, and then it's at risk of crashing into another airspace user. And obviously, you do want to do beyond line of sight flying because that's how you're going to achieve like the benefit of the drone being, robotic, and you don't need a pilot. And marine is great for that because as you're flying in an airspace that doesn't have many airspace user in general, it's much easier to get permits to do those beyond line of sight flying. So that's one element. But in terms of technical opportunity, you were saying what's interesting is the marine problem is very different to most drone problems. Probably the most useful or most developed use case with drones today is flying quadcopters for movie making, or flying quadcopters for doing like small scale survey. So taking photos of a roof to inspect it, whether some tiles are gone or something. And
Right.
that's super useful for this because you don't have to go with a ladder or something. And that's great. But that's like very, very small scale. You literally fly a few meters and that's it. If you want to monitor the sea, where it's like 70% of the planet's surface, whilst cities is like 2%, you need to cover much more than just taking photos of a roof. And because of this, the drone needs to be vastly different. Traditionally, the way the military has done this is by doing very, very big drones that fly for a very, very long time and stay airborne for like 24 hours, and that's how they cover a large area. But it's very expensive because the very big drones, like, tons and tons, that are expensive to manufacture, expensive to fly. So we went completely the other way around. Is we said, actually, if you want to cover a large area, let's just go very quickly. Like we might not fly for a super long time, but we're going to cover a lot of distance. And we're going to focus as well on coastal surveillance. So we don't need to cover 70% of the planet, like the whole waters. We're just going to cover the first 50 kilometers, which is where most of the marine activity is anyway. So I guess the thing that we did differently was, one, constrained to relatively short range. So we don't need a really big drone to go super far. And two, make it fly very fast so we can deploy several of them in parallel to collect a lot of data on that short range, close to shore.
So who regulates that? Like I know here in the United States, you've got the FAA that regulates that, but like who regulates that over the ocean?
It's still going to be the local authority, like in whichever country you're flying. I guess maybe if you extend past like exclusive economic area or something, it might be something international, but we're not going that far. So yeah, it's still like the jurisdiction of the country, so you have to deal with the same authorities as if you were flying above land. And it depends per country who that is. There are countries where we've flown where the people managing the airspace, the equivalent of the FAA, is going to be the Air Force directly. And that makes it much easier if you're flying for them or if you're flying for like the Coast Guards or something. In the UK, it's the same as in the US. It's like the CAA. So you need to get a permit to fly beyond line of sight. So yeah, it is quite case by case. But what's interesting with the sea is you typically can get one permit for a very large area. So it's not like if you want to do BVLOS above land, you might need to get a permit for this city and then another one for this city, or maybe for that farm you
Right.
want to get. At the sea, you usually get one very large one. So the number of permits you need to get per area covered is much better above sea. It makes it easier to operate BVLOS.
So I would imagine that the maritime environment creates some unique challenges. Um, what's one of the most difficult challenges Marvel has faced in deploying drones for maritime surveillance, and how did you address it?
Interesting. It's actually less challenging in some way, and that's the reason why we're doing it. There's the one I mentioned about the regulation, but there's another one that is interesting. It's if you collect data above land, you have to account for the terrain, right? You can't consistently say, if I'm looking to the side of the window, if you're in a plane, I'm going to be able to see up to that distance because there might be trees, there might be
Right.
so you can't, like, if you were to scan, say, farm fields, you have to fly pretty much right above the field you want to survey, because if you were to the side, again, you might have trees in between or something. If you're out at sea, you don't have that problem, because unless you have a very, very big vessel, like, you can actually consistently say, if I look to the side, I'm going to see up to like whatever number of kilometers. And because of this, it makes it much easier to have sensors that can detect very far and to do that monitoring with a relatively small number of, like, as I've said, relatively small high-speed drones that are inexpensive to operate. So in some way, the marine environment is easier. Another reason the marine environment is easier is, you can imagine, if you wanted to do, I don't know, like like you want to do border control, for example, and you want to automatically detect trying to cross the border over land, it's going to be quite difficult, the computer vision to automatically do that because, you know, like lots of other features and yeah, it's difficult. At sea, much easier. Finding a vessel in like, you know, a relatively constant blue background, doing the computer vision to detect that also much easier. So in some way, actually, yeah, it's actually an easier problem on lots of respect, which is why we've done this one. The one area where it's harder gets back to what we discussed earlier is the fact that you need to cover a large area. And to cover a large area, you need lots of drones, you need to fly them a lot. So it's like harder from an aircraft perspective and from an aerospace perspective, but from all the rest, regulation, sensor, computer vision, AI, all these things, it's actually easier than most use cases.
That totally makes sense. Um, I noticed in my notes that you use 3D, you've talked about 3D printing in drone development. How has that technology contributed to Marble's drone production, innovation, and scalability?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's been actually quite transformational for us being able to use 3D printing, but it's been like that specifically because our drones, as I've said, are very small. And 3D printers tend to be relatively small print volume. Like you can't print like a big airliner, right? So the biggest typically in like, yeah, I mean, the biggest print volume might be something like this. So even if you do a big drone or a traditional drone, it's going to be, I mean, you could 3D print portion, but you'll still have a lot of assembly. So you kind of negate a lot of the benefit of 3D printing. Because the big benefit in 3D printing is how quickly you can do changes to your design and have an output straight away. But also it means you can print the whole thing coming, like the ideal realization of 3D printing would be the whole thing comes out manufactured and you have very, very little post-processing to do things, right? Maybe just laying out cables. For us, because we have small drones, we still have to do a few different parts, but it's really limited, the number of parts we need to assemble at the end. So it doesn't come out fully finished, but really quite close. Um, so it makes a massive difference to have 3D printing for us. If we were doing it out of carbon fiber, for example, we would have a lot of time for assembly and everything, and not even mentioning again like quick iteration, the fact that every plane can be different. But that's only true because our drones are small. Because if they were bigger, you would lose most of the benefit. So yeah, I think without it, it would be much harder to do what we're doing now.
Yeah, you use the technology that effectively works for, your production line, right? I mean, that's pretty much it. So, you've had quite a journey. You were an aerospace engineering student, and now you're the CEO of Marble. What advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs who want to make a tangible impact on whatever industry they get involved with?
Interesting, because I feel like, I'm still very early in the journey. I think so far the thing that has been most helpful and maybe the things that differentiate myself compared to other people that started company in the field, I guess it's like the resilience and like the just keeping going because you have conviction. Because you have an interest in drones, right? And surely you would have seen a lot of startups starting and then just disappearing. And then like there's been a lot of cycle like this of even like 10 years ago, a company would start, 3 years later, they're gone. And because it's really difficult to make it work in that industry. So I guess the advice is just pick something that you know you're gonna have that resilience in, and it doesn't come from like an ambition to achieve some status or something because you're a successful entrepreneur. It's just it has to be you really want to see something in the world, and you're gonna keep going until that vision occurs, even if that means for 10 years you might be working on a small team and struggling every few years to raise some capital to try to make your vision happen. So I guess that my main advice is like pick the right domain where you could see yourself keeping going for like 10 years or so.
Passion. Yeah, passion.
Exactly. Hmm.
So I want you to use your imagination with me for a minute.
Hmm.
Um, let's say you were stranded on an island somewhere and you could have a drone that has three custom features designed by Marble that's going to aid in your survival or your escape. What would those three features be?
Interesting. I guess I mean the I would clearly the drone that we if it was us doing it, the drone wouldn't be one that would transport you out. So I would use the drone to communicate to the outside world. This is where we are. Come pick us up, please. So I guess the number one feature would be just having a drone that can fly far enough to be able to reach a land somewhere where you expect someone to receive your message. So a bit like yeah, I would like write in a piece of paper, put it inside the plane, and literally hope someone finds it. So that's how I would use it. So the number one feature would be having the right range. Uh, because I'm assuming, in an island in the Pacific, you would have like thousands and thousands of kilometers. Uh, the second one would be the reliability, because like a drone might be able to do that journey, but would the drone be able to confidently do it? If there is a 50% chance that the drone does it, that's still not great. So I would focus on the reliability. There's actually, I don't know if like, for example, I think it's 1998, a team of three aerospace engineer, no, three, well, a team of aerospace engineers designed a drone that crossed the Atlantic from Canada to Scotland. That was in 1998. That was a drone of, I think it was like 8 kilos. And the way they did that is they launched three aircraft, and only one made it. So I guess, yeah, similarly, I would do three things. Yeah, one, range, two, reliability, and then three, being able to dispatch three of those aircraft with like a note on board that said, here is my location. That's what I would do.
Cool. That's really cool. Um, so here's another one to use your imagination on. So imagine that some alien civilization discovered Marvel's technology. Um, how do you think they would interpret its purpose? Like, what do you think they'd
Uh,
think it was for?
yeah. Um, I'm trying to imagine, I guess, like
Yeah, it's a tough one.
yeah. I'm quite a structured person. So I'm like, okay, well, so if they discovered us, they would probably have much more advanced understanding of science and technology than us, right? They would have traveled all the way to here. So they would be looking at every technology on Earth, including ours, as being very primitive, probably. So I'm sure they would probably be in a few seconds being able to figure out what this was for, because it would be like a bit us looking at like a wooden arrow or something, or like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we've seen that before. Um, but yeah. I guess, yeah, the other way I would think about it is like, if an expert in our field was looking at it, what would they think seeing the aircraft from the outside? Which I guess is like another way to think about it. And yeah, you would think it's a small aircraft designed to fly fast. That's probably what the main thing you can tell from the outside. The other thing you could tell is our drone. It's not just the drone; it's the sensor as well. So traditional drone, have a single camera on a gimbal to capture video, right? Like you can swivel left and right, up and down. Ours has an array of 5 cameras looking sideways to take photos very far away, above water. So I guess that external person would look at it and say, okay, this is something that flies fast and is really designed to collect lots of imagery over a large area.
It's true. Like I would imagine they probably even had some kind of technology similar to that already, either in their past or present. So they might not be totally shocked by it, but just always an interesting thing to think
Mm,
about. So like, you know, people get inspired by music, right? And it's like a source of inspiration and motivation for some people. What song or type of music would best represent the journey of Marble and why?
that's another tricky one.
Yeah, they're designed to make you think.
I mean, it would have to be a very long and complex piece of music. Yeah, something with like ups and downs, but I guess that would apply for most startups. Like yeah, yeah, there would be some section that would be epic and lots of excitement, and then maybe a few minutes after, in that same song, suddenly it's not going as well, and it's like going through those cycle again. When you start a company, it's not up and to the right, continuously growing. So that's broadly what the direction I would go in, like looking at what song would fit the description, and trying to remember the name of one song in particular. I mean, I listen to a lot of heavy metal or like speed metal, and
Sure. Me
like
too, actually.
you do, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a band I really like. It's called Nightwish. I don't know if you've heard of that band.
No.
It's Finnish, and it has a kind of like a female lead opera singer type of voice. And the name, they have a very famous song that is like 10 minutes. And again, you can imagine, in a 10-minute song, it's quite complex, and it has like very odd time signature, and it goes up and down in terms of like how aggressive and epic it is, and sometimes like more downbeats. So I guess I can't remember the name of the song, which is annoying. But yeah, that's what I would pick.
Awesome, awesome. So, as we're getting close to the end here, what's your hope for the future of Marble? What do you see you guys doing, say, in 5, 10 years from now?
Yeah. Well, I would hope having completely transformed the way we monitor the planet. Uh, the because the way we do it mostly nowadays is you have very consistent coverage with satellites, right? That are just going around the planet. The issue with satellite is you can't really, like the one that do aerial monitoring, like Earth observation. You can't really just stop them and tell them like, okay, stay here and give us real time data or this, or give us really high resolution, or or ignore the clouds, like because a large portion of the planet is covered by clouds, so you can't get the data you want. So it's kind of like because of this, satellites are long term. You can't get rid of the weather. You can't get rid of the fact that you have to be on an orbit. So all of that really limits you with satellite, how well you can monitor the planet. And so ultimately, long term, I think the much better version of this is going to be to have lots of drones being deployed everywhere, small enough, fast enough that you don't notice them and they don't affect you, and just continuously do that kind of like a digital twin of the planet. And that data would be available, not the way it is available today with drones, where you need to, today for a drone, I mean, you probably know this, you need to go with your drone somewhere and collect the data you want with your drone. Long term, what I hope in 10 years we see is the drone data is available the same way as satellite data is available today. What that means is you go onto a website and you would just say, can I have, please, in 2 minutes, I want a photo of this area. And then you don't have to do anything. There are fleets of drones flying everywhere and can collect that data with exactly the sensor you want, whether that's like a multispectral sensor, thermal, whatever. And to me, looking at knowing the technology, I think that's inevitable that that will happen. 10 years sounds like a completely reasonable time frame. And ultimately, when that happens, there won't be pilots. It's just going to be some form of robotic infrastructure where the drones takes off and land from and just fly like 24/7 everywhere. And yeah, I think when that occurs, you can imagine for there will be so much data that by that point we'll have probably also much better AI models that will be able to tell us everything we need to know about, the status of our crops, the status of like maybe road accident or people being lost at sea or fisheries monitoring. Like, I think it's going to be transformational to like how good we can manage our planet and our societies.
Do you think, like, I'm hearing a lot of rumbling about like Amazon using drones to deliver products and whatnot. Um, how viable do you think that really is?
Long term, I don't think it's as obvious as like what I've just said for the data collection. I've just said it's inevitable, like my like the vision I was describing. I think for logistics, I don't know if it's as inevitable, because there are probably lots of use cases where you don't need to have a drone delivering something to you. You could probably do it with just keep going to a shop or something. So there is definitely going to be areas where this is useful. So that might be delivering things to a ship and the ship doesn't need to come to port, for example, for like some specific paperwork or whatever, or maybe for a remote area or for people in the military on the front line. There's definitely areas where it's useful to do to move physical things using drones. Um, but I wouldn't be so sure that it's
Interesting.
going to be like, everywhere 24/7 all the time. And also what's going to be interesting is you've probably seen eVTOLs, the air taxis, like companies like Joby or Archer, Lilium. These companies are literally building like large drones to transport people. And if you have that network, why would you need smaller ones just to do logistics? I feel like you might be able to, like, if you have these companies building air taxis, these can probably be repurposed to do logistics as well. So I don't know how much value there is in that middle space of like Amazon doing logistics, but so it will happen at some scale for sure. I'm not convinced it's going to be a super large scale, and it's going to take a while because from a regulatory standpoint, that's one of the hardest thing to do. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. What I think is like my wife is from Canada and she's from a very rural part of Canada. And like her dad, when we send him packages, 99% of the delivery companies won't go to his house because, and you live in a rural area, you get up to their driveway and like it's 2.5 miles in and 2.5 miles back out to get
Wow.
to the house. So he always has to go to like a post office in town to pick up. He actually goes to it's a drugstore where they leave this stuff. It's kind of funny. It's like a little small town out of an old movie. But I think that that's where the opportunity lies is in getting to these more remote locations and being able to deliver a little bit faster than they can now. But I don't think like I live in Las Vegas. I don't think people here would appreciate drones buzzing around the neighborhood and
Yeah.
it just seems with the number of people who complain about drones and don't understand what they're all about, it seems like it would just escalate like crazy. But in a remote area, it just totally makes sense to me. So I think it's going to be like, they tend to know what they're doing over there. I think to my way of thinking, I just think it's going to be a supplemental way to deliver. Whereas a lot of the news media is making it sound like they're going to get rid of the trucks and they're only going to deliver. No, they're not. Like that's
For sure. Yeah.
because then you'd have to, I mean, that drone can only handle probably that one package. And so it's not going to be like the truck where it has like 50 people's stuff in there or 100 people's stuff in there. It's one drone goes, drops it off, has to go back to wherever it came from to pick up another package and, keep doing that. I think I think the whole concept is somewhat crazy, actually, if you ask me. But I've learned as a guy who's been involved in technology for 30 plus years that things that you thought were impossible, somehow people figure out how to do it. So, really interesting. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation, especially since I'm a drone enthusiast.
Mhm.
It's nice to pick your brain about stuff like that. So, why don't you let the audience know how they can connect with you and if they want to reach out, maybe for a project or something.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the easiest is on our website, www.marble.aero, AERO. There's forms there to contact us. Otherwise, it's contact@marble.aero. We have some online media presence as well on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. But the easiest would be just by email directly.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that'll be up on a card for people to have a look at. And thanks again for being here. Really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike. Had a really good time.
No problem. Well, thanks everyone for listening to Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. New episodes every Wednesday, 8 a.m. Pacific on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Hope to see you back here next week for another exciting episode.